Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at something a little different, something that's, I think, going to make you think a little bit differently about that smartphone you're probably carrying around with you right now. Are we already cyborgs? I know it kind of sounds like we're getting into the science fiction territory here, but
Mm.
stick with me. We've got a really fascinating academic paper that we're going to be looking at. It talks about the impact of technology on our brains. And then we've got a couple of articles that really kind of explore this question of, what does it mean to be human in this like increasingly digital world? And I've got an expert here with me today
Hello.
who is going to help us kind of unpack some of these ideas. And I think you'll be pretty surprised by what we find.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because I think when people hear that word cyborg, it conjures up these images of, futuristic beings with metal limbs and, glowing eyes and all this kind of stuff. But you know what? I told you that maybe we're already kind of in this process of what we might call like external cyborgization. Our smartphones, the internet, this constant access that we have, it's become such an extension of ourselves in ways that we might not even really realize.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit, that idea of external cyborgization. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it, right? Our smartphones, they've essentially become like external hard drives for our brains.
Hmm.
We rely on them for everything these days, appointments,
Yeah.
directions, even just like simple calculations that, maybe in the past we would have done in our heads. It's almost like we've kind of offloaded part of our, cognitive function onto these devices.
So we're not like literally merging with machines,
Yeah.
but we're becoming so reliant on them that they're starting to feel like a part of us in a way.
Exactly. And, this brings us to, I think, a really fascinating concept that's discussed in the academic paper, this idea of cognitive offloading. And so researchers have actually, found that when we rely on technology for these kinds of memory tasks, things that we used to, just remember in our heads, it actually can change the way our brains process and store information.
Wow. That's kind of mind-blowing. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean,
Yeah.
it's super convenient to have, Google Maps tell me how to get everywhere, but what's it doing to my brain?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
And so the paper actually talks about a study that was done where they gave participants, certain information to remember, knowing that some of it would be accessible later on a computer. And guess what? They were less likely to remember the information they knew they could easily access.
So it's like my brain's getting lazy because it knows that my phone is always there to bail me out.
In a way, yeah. And this has some pretty, interesting implications for our long-term memory. And so the paper suggests that, this constant offloading this might actually be hindering the way memories are consolidated and stored in our brains.
Wait, so by like making life easier in the short term, we might actually be doing some kind of harm to our brains in the long run?
Well, it's a possibility. It's something that researchers are, definitely exploring, and it raises even more questions, like what happens to our understanding of knowledge and memory when we have this kind of instant access to information? Are we losing something valuable by outsourcing these cognitive processes?
It's like we're stepping into some kind of like, Black Mirror episode or something, but this isn't, science fiction. This is like actually happening right now.
Right, and it goes beyond memory too. Our social lives these days are so deeply intertwined with technology. Think about social media. These platforms have become like our virtual town squares in a way. This is where we connect with friends, share experiences, even kind of shape our identities.
Yeah, it makes me think of another concept from the paper, this idea of transactive memory. And it's this idea that we rely on networks, right? And in this case, digital networks to store and share information. It's like we've become so interconnected that our knowledge and our memories are almost kind of collective.
Yeah, it is fascinating, isn't it? We're becoming social cyborgs in a sense, right? Relying on these digital networks to remember birthdays, share news, stay in touch with loved ones.
Think about it. How much of your social life actually exists online?
Yeah.
Do you feel a difference between the you that exists online versus the you that, exists in the real world?
That's a great question. And, it leads us to, I think, another really intriguing aspect of this whole cyborg evolution, this idea of like the erosion of boundaries, between ourselves and technology. It's not just a tool anymore that we pick up and put down. It's like integrated into the fabric of our daily lives.
Huh. And it's blowing the lines in some pretty, profound ways.
Mhm.
I think we'll you articles that we read for this deep dive, Letters to the Cyborgs by Judith Ferry Baker. She really kind of dives into this idea, and she talks about how technology is becoming so embedded in our lives that it's starting to feel like an extension of our very selves.
Right. And what I think is really interesting about Baker's perspective is she highlights this concept of functional unity, this idea that our devices and our bodies are starting to function as a single unit. It's almost like we're evolving into this new type of being, one that's both biological and technological.
Right. So we've got this idea of cognitive offloading where we're relying on technology for, memory and information, and this functional unity where the lines between us and our devices are becoming more and more blurred. I mean, this is getting deep.
It is. It is, and it raises some, I think, really big questions about, what does it even mean to be human in this age of, technological
Right.
integration? What are we gaining? What are we potentially losing?
I think that's a perfect place to maybe pause for a second and reflect, dear listener. What are your initial thoughts on all of this? Are you starting to see yourself and your relationship with technology in a new light? Keep those thoughts in mind as we continue this deep dive.
So, as we kind of delve deeper into this whole, cyborg reality that we're talking about, I think it's really important to consider, what are some of the potential consequences of this growing reliance on technology? It's not all sunshine and roses.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's easy to get kind of caught up in the convenience and the excitement of all the new gadgets and the apps and everything. But, maybe we're not really stopping to think about the long-term implications. What are some of those potential downsides that we should be aware of?
Well, one that comes up, repeatedly in a lot of the sources that we looked at is this potential for addiction. I mean, we all know how easy it is to kind of get sucked into our phones, right? Constantly checking notifications, scrolling through social media. But for some people, this can actually become a real problem,
Yeah.
leading to anxiety, sleep disturbances, even difficulty focusing on work or relationships.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, we've all felt that pull to be constantly connected, and it can be really hard to break free sometimes.
Right. And it's not just about, individual well-being either. There are some, broader societal implications to consider as well. As we become more reliant on technology, we're generating, these massive amounts of data about ourselves, our location, our browsing history, our spending habits, even like our emotional states. And, this data is incredibly valuable to companies, to buildings. They can use it for targeted advertising surveillance, even manipulation.
Yeah, that is a little bit unsettling. It's like we're kind of, trading our privacy for convenience without really fully understanding the consequences.
Exactly. And it raises these really important questions about autonomy. Are we really in control of our choices and our data, or are we being kind of, subtly influenced by algorithms and targeted messaging in ways that we don't even realize? And as artificial intelligence becomes more and more sophisticated, this issue is only going to become more critical.
It's like we're entering this world where the line between, human and machine is becoming, increasingly blurred. It makes you wonder, what does it even mean to be human in this kind of context?
And that's, really the fundamental question that I think Judith Ferry Baker is grappling with in Letters to the Cyborgs. She argues that we need to be really careful not to lose sight of our human essence, our capacity for empathy, creativity, critical thinking, genuine connection as we become more intertwined with technology.
It's like we're walking this tightrope, trying to balance the
That's a bit.
benefits of technology with the preservation of our humanity. And it's not just about individual choices either. It's about like societal values and ethical considerations.
Oh, absolutely. We need to be having these conversations about, what kind of world do we want to create? What are the ethical boundaries that we need to establish? What role do we want technology to play in our lives?
Yeah, I'm curious, what are some of the specific questions that you think we should be asking ourselves as individuals and as a society?
Well, one key question is, how do we ensure that technology serves humanity rather than the other way around? We need to think about who benefits from these technological advancements, who might be left behind. How can we mitigate potential harms?
That's a great point. It's easy to kind of get caught up in the hype and assume that all technological progress is inherently good, but that's not always the case. We need to be a little more critical and discerning.
Right. Another important question is, how do we protect our privacy and autonomy in a world where data is constantly being collected and analyzed? Do we need stronger regulations? Do we need to develop new technologies that prioritize privacy? These are really complex issues with, no easy answers, but they're conversations we need to be having.
Yeah. I mean, it can feel a little overwhelming, to be honest. It's like we're at this crossroads, and the decisions that we make now are going to have this huge impact on the future.
It's true, but it's not all, doom and gloom.
Hmm.
There are reasons for optimism as well. Technology does have the potential to solve some of the world's most pressing problems.
Wow.
Things like climate change, poverty, disease, and there are a lot of people working really hard to develop and deploy technologies in ways that are ethical, sustainable, and beneficial to humanity.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Yeah.
It's good to remember that, we do have agency. We can shape the future of technology and kind of steer it in a positive direction. But, we need to be informed, engaged, and willing to ask those tough questions.
Exactly. It's not about rejecting technology altogether. It's about finding a balance that allows us to kind of harness its power while preserving our humanity.
So, dear listener, as we kind of wrap up this segment, I want to leave you with this thought-provoking question. What kind of future do you want to see? What role do you want technology to play in your life and in the world around you? Think about it. The answers might surprise you. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, exploring this whole idea of a cyborg reality. And I got to say, it's a bit daunting. Where do we go from here? How do we actually navigate this world in a way that feels empowering instead of overwhelming?
Right. And that's, I think, the million-dollar question. And, what's interesting is the sources that we've been looking at actually offer some really, practical strategies for doing just that. And, it's not about rejecting technology altogether. It's about, finding a way to integrate it into our lives in a way that feels, healthy and
Okay,
balanced.
I'm all ears. What are some of those strategies? Because I think, we could all use a little guidance here.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel like we're just kind of getting swept along by, the tide of all these technological advancements.
Well, one key theme that comes up again and again is this idea of mindfulness. It's about being more intentional, more aware of how we're using technology, not just kind of passively letting it consume our time and attention.
So it's about setting boundaries,
Yeah,
right? Like creating tech-free zones in our homes or, designating certain times of day where we just put the phones away.
exactly. It's about making conscious choices about when and how we engage with technology. So, instead of automatically reaching for your phone first thing in the morning, maybe you start your day with a book or go for a walk or have a conversation with a loved one.
I love that idea. It's about kind of reclaiming those moments for ourselves and reconnecting with the things that truly matter. I think Judith Vary Baker would approve. She's all about, prioritizing those genuine human experiences.
Absolutely. And it's not just about limiting screen time either. It's about really being present in the moment when we're not using technology, savoring a meal without, taking pictures for Instagram, having a conversation without checking our notifications, really experiencing the world around us without feeling the need to document it all the time.
Right. It's a reminder that, technology should enhance our lives, not distract us from them.
Exactly. And another really, I think, crucial skill for navigating this cyborg reality is what's called digital literacy. It's about being able to critically evaluate information, recognize biases, distinguish fact from fiction in this, increasingly digital landscape.
It sounds like we all need to become like information detectives, constantly analyzing and questioning the information that's coming at us.
Yeah, in a way we're bombarded with so much information these days, and it's not all, reliable or accurate. And so digital literacy helps us, filter through all the noise, identify credible sources, make informed decisions. It's about understanding, how algorithms shape our online experiences, how to break free from filter bubbles, how to protect ourselves from misinformation and manipulation.
That's a powerful tool for anyone,
Yeah.
navigating this digital age,
Yeah.
regardless of whether they consider themselves a cyborg or not.
Absolutely. And, here's another piece of the puzzle. I think advocating for ethical tech development. It's not enough to just be mindful and informed consumers of technology. We also need to be active citizens. We need to
Yeah.
be demanding that technology is designed and deployed in ways that actually benefit humanity.
So it's about, speaking of voting with our wallets, supporting companies and organizations that are aligned with our values, and holding, the ones that aren't accountable.
Exactly. We have a responsibility to shape the future of technology, not just passively accept whatever comes our way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it can feel kind of overwhelming to think about, tackling these big issues. But it's important to remember that even small actions can make a difference. Every time we choose a privacy-focused app, or we support a company that's committed to ethical AI development, or we just, start a conversation about these issues with our friends and family,
Yeah.
We're contributing to a better future.
Absolutely. Change happens one step at a time, and it starts with each of us, taking responsibility for our role in this technological landscape.
Well, dear listener, we've explored some, pretty thought-provoking concepts today, and I hope you're leaving this deep dive feeling a sense of empowerment, not overwhelm.
This cyborg reality is here to stay, but it's not something to be feared. It's an opportunity to evolve, adapt, and consciously create a future where technology enhances our lives without diminishing our humanity.
So be mindful, be informed, be engaged, and be the change you want to see in the world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.